X-Men 97, it's gotta be one of the biggest surprises Marvel has dropped in years. And today, guys, we're gonna recap the full story from the very beginning, because I have nothing better to do. But the show, it brings back the classic animated X-Men right after Professor Xavier is gone, which means the team is already grieving and barely holding itself together before the world starts throwing giant mutant-killing robots at them again. At the center of all of it is a team trying to keep Xavier's dream alive in a world that keeps making Magneto look annoyingly right. So before the next chapter begins, we're going through the entire story of X-Men 97. Episode 1, To Me, My X-Men. Episode 1 opens by reminding us that Professor X is gone, and somehow the world is pretending that means it has finally learned to tolerate mutants. Obviously, that lasts about 5 seconds. A young mutant named Roberto da Costa gets kidnapped by the Friends of Humanity, an anti-mutant group using prisoners for target practice because hate crimes also need a training mode. Storm and Bishop arrive to save him, with Storm giving them one chance to surrender before the whole room turns into a light show. Cyclops joins the rescue, gets Roberto out, and the team quickly realizes the Friends of Humanity are using Sentinel tech. And if you didn't know, that's a very bad sign, since Sentinels are basically giant murder robots built specifically to make a mutant's life worse. Back at the mansion that blows up all the time, Roberto wakes up confused, terrified, and surrounded by strangers with powers. Beast treats him, Jubilee tries to make him feel welcome, and Roberto mostly just wants to go home. Which, I mean, is fair. He probably wants to go home and play Nintendo, and getting rescued is nice and all, but waking up in a secret mutant mansion, it's still a lot to process before breakfast. Then Cyclops, he's got bigger problems though, with Jean, who's pregnant, and the two of them, they're thinking about leaving the team to raise their child somewhere slightly less likely to be attacked by killer robots. Scott knows they need a real life, but he's also carrying Xavier's dream on his back, and he clearly has no idea how to put it down. The Sentinel tech, it also eventually leads the X-Men to Bolivar Trask, who's working with Master Mold to build a new army of mutant hunting machines. So the team heads to the Sahara to shut it down, only for their jet to get attacked on the way there. Because if there's one thing the X-Men jet does consistently, it's exploding dramatically. Cyclops gets knocked out of the sky, but instead of dying like a normal person, he uses his optic blasts to slow his fall, land safely, and delivers the line, "To me, my X-Men." I wish the live-action Cyclops was this cool. Maybe in Doomsday, we'll see. But from there, the episode becomes one long reminder that this team is ridiculous when they actually work together. Storm, she turns the battlefield against the Sentinels. Beast hijacks one from the inside. Gambit charges Wolverine's claws, and the X-Men, they tear through the robots like they are personally offended anyone forgot how cool they were. Master Mold is destroyed, Trask is stopped, and the team survives the mission. But the episode still takes time to show Roberto struggling with what he is. He reveals to Jubilee that he can absorb solar energy, but he's not proud of it for some reason. But the dude was just scared, ashamed, and worried about what his family will think. So while the X-Men are busy saving mutant kind, Roberto's still stuck at the part where being a mutant feels like a secret that could ruin his life. Scott and Jean then prepare to tell them that they are leaving, but before they can get through the announcement, someone breaks into Xavier's office. And you know who it is? It's stupid, sexy Magneto. Him and his luscious, stupid hair, I hate him. But anyway, he claims Xavier left everything to him, from the school and the fortune that comes along with it, with the future of the X-Men as well. So the episode ends with the team defeating one mutant extinction threat, only to learn their greatest enemy may now be their landlord. With Magneto now holding the keys to Xavier's entire dream, the team's next problem is figuring out whether their enemy is actually trying to change or just getting a better office. Episode 2, Mutant Liberation begins. So episode 2, guys, this one starts with Magneto trying to prove he's changed. Stupid, sexy Magneto, which is difficult though when your personal brand is mostly helmets, capes, and decades of attempted mutant supremacy. He saves people from a disaster at Coney Island though, typical day at Coney Island, and the news starts debating whether the former terrorist might actually be trying to become a hero. So yes, the world is already handling this better than anyone expected. Back at the mansion, however, the X-Men aren't taking it very well though. Wolverine wants him gone, and Cyclops is furious because he and Jean were supposed to leave the team before Magneto walked in and ruined everything. Magneto insists he wants to honor Charles Xavier's dream, but nobody's exactly thrilled that the dream now comes with a giant cape. Scott, he's also stuck between two lives here. He's about to become a parent, and Jean knows their child needs them more than the team does. Scott, he knows that too, but with Magneto in charge, leaving, it's not in the cards anymore. Nothing says healthy work-life balance like staying at your dangerous superhero job because your old enemy inherited the building. Like, what is happening? I will say that Magneto does try, though. He speaks with Storm about how much he admires her gift, and he has a tense, albeit very loaded conversation with Rogue that makes it clear that there's some history there. Gambit notices, obviously because his girlfriend having mysterious emotional tension with Magneto isn't exactly easy to miss. Then the UN arrives and arrests Magneto for crimes against humanity, and the man agrees to stand trial, which is either a genuine act of accountability or the most dramatic PR stunt in mutant history. Knowing Magneto, it's probably both. Him and Loki would love each other. At the trial, though, Magneto explains that humanity has hunted mutants the same way it has always hunted anyone it decides is different. The judges argue that humans need protection. Magneto argues that mutants have been protecting themselves from humanity for years. It isn't exactly a friendly courtroom debate. Then the Friends of Humanity, well, they attack, and their new leader, the Executioner, it's a funny name, storms the building with a weapon designed to strip mutants of their powers. Meanwhile, Jean goes into labor, so Cyclops has to leave the fight and get to the hospital, finally making the choice he has been avoiding all along. Now, the hospital situation, it isn't much calmer. Wolverine drives Jean there like the baby is being delivered by car chase, the doctor refuses to handle a mutant birth, and Rogue has to absorb his medical knowledge just to help deliver the child. But somehow, little Nathan Charles Summers is born in the middle of all of this. Welcome to the family, kid. It only gets worse from here. Back at the UN, however, Storm saves Magneto from the Executioner's blast, funny name, and loses her powers instead. Magneto, he nearly snaps at this. He raises the entire courtroom into the sky and reminds everyone exactly why they were scared of him in the first place. But instead of destroying them, he chooses mercy because Charles trusted him with a dream, and for once, he actually tries to be worthy of it. The world responds by pardoning Magneto. Janosha is welcomed into the UN, and the X-Men have a newborn baby to celebrate. But Storm, she leaves the team after learning her powers may be gone permanently. And just when the episode seems like it has done enough damage, another Jean Grey arrives at the mansion looking terrified and asking for help. Great, what else could go wrong? Episode 3, Fire Made Flesh. Well, episode 3 opens with the X-Men dealing with the worst possible maternity complication, with a second Jean Grey showing up at the front door. Beast, he runs tests on both genes, and the results, they aren't comforting. One gene has a full history of memories, while the other has fragments, like her mind only started existing recently. So, naturally, everyone handles this with the emotional stability of people who fight psychic trauma for a living. The Jean who just gave birth is horrified that nobody immediately believes she's the real one, especially Scott, who keeps trying to be calm, but mostly looks like a man realizing his marriage has become a scientific study. And Beast eventually confirms that the new arrival is the original Jean Grey, meaning the woman who gave birth to Nathan is a clone, which is a rough way to find out your entire life has been one long identity theft incident. Then Mr. Sinister appears through her mind and makes everything worse. He reveals he engineered the situation because he wanted a child born from Scott and Jean's genetics. And so the clone lashes out and starts transforming into the Goblin Queen because one existential crisis wasn't dramatic enough. From there, the mansion turns into a nightmare. The X-Men, they start seeing twisted versions of people they love as reality melts around them, and the whole place fills with monsters that look like they crawled out of a horror movie the animators were definitely too excited to draw. The real Jean eventually reaches the clone inside the psychic chaos, and the two women start digging through the memories Sinister stole and twisted. The clone remembers pieces of Jean's life, including the Phoenix, the wedding, and every feeling that made her believe she was real, which is the cruelest part of the whole thing because emotionally she was. Meanwhile, Sinister gets his hands on baby Nathan and prepares to experiment on him. His whole plan is to use the child's genetics to create something stronger because Mr. Sinister has never met a baby he didn't immediately view as a lab sample. The X-Men fight their way to him, but Sinister infects Nathan with a techno-organic virus before they can stop him. Bishop realizes there's only one way to save the child here. Nathan has to be taken into the future where the technology exists to save him. Scott and the clone are devastated, but they know there's absolutely no other choice. So their son, who was born about 5 minutes ago, is already being shipped off into another timeline. Parenting in the X-Men universe is pretty shoddy, what can I say? The clone, though, finally chooses a name for herself, Madeline Pryor. She says goodbye to Nathan, lets Bishop take him, and then leaves the mansion to figure out who she is without Jean's memories defining her. The episode ends with the team emotionally wrecked, especially Scott and Jean, whose marriage is now in pieces, and Storm meeting Forge, an old friend of Xavier's who says he can help her get her powers back. And Subtlety has officially left the building. Episode 4, Motendo, Life Death, Part 1. But episode 4, guys, finally slows things down a little, which for this show means there's only 2 life-altering crises instead of 4. The first half, it follows Jubilee on her 18th birthday. She wants one normal day, ideally involving the arcade, but Magneto shuts that down because the X-Men is under new management, which absolutely frustrates Jubilee. But Roberto hangs around trying to cheer her up, which starts feeling like the setup to a very weird date. Ooh! Then Jubilee finds a mysterious Nintendo console in her room. She turns it on, and Roberto gets pulled in with her, and the two of them are sucked into a video game run by Mojo, the most obnoxious interdimensional TV executive alive, which is impressive because television executives are already a competitive category. Mojo explains that his new game is built from Jubilee's memories, so she and Roberto have to fight through nostalgic X-Men levels, while he feeds off the audience. It's very silly, loud, and very 90s, so honestly, mission accomplished for us as viewers. The game also forces Jubilee to confront how much she's clinging to the past. She misses the old team, the old mansion, and the old version of her life where Charles was still around. Roberto, meanwhile, he's gotta face his own fear of being seen as a mutant. So eventually, even the arcade finds a way to make everyone uncomfortable. I told you, we're getting that life crisis. They eventually meet an older digital version of Jubilee who has been trapped inside Mojo's game, reliving the glory days over and over. She helps them fight back, and Jubilee accepts that growing up doesn't mean losing herself, and they defeat Mojo. Then, the second half of the episode shifts to Storm, who's living with Forge while trying to recover her lost powers. Forge is charming, brilliant, and exactly the kind of man who shows up in a romance novel right before everything becomes a problem. So he tells Storm he may be able to reactivate the dormant parts of her brain and help restore what the Executioner took from her. For a moment, it works emotionally, even before it works scientifically. Storm and Forge ride together, talk about loss, and start falling for each other faster than you could say Yahtzee, which, to be fair, is basically standard pacing for the X-Men. They just move fast. Remember the baby? He's in another timeline. Then Mr. Forge reveals the oh, I just got it. Forge, and he makes machines. How did I just get that? But Forge reveals the machine he built to help her. In Storm, she begins to hope again. She reaches for the wind, the rain, the thunder, everything that used to answer her. But the moment breaks when she learns Forge was the one who created the original technology that led to mutant power suppression to begin with. So the man trying to heal her is also connected to her wound. It's a great first date, isn't it? Storm, she feels betrayed. She walks away, but the episode isn't done ruining her night. She wakes up trapped, hunted, and confronted by a demonic creature called the Adversary. While Jubilee is forced to stop clinging to the past, and Storm is left trapped with the man tied to her pain, the rest of mutant kind is stepping into the brightest future it has ever been offered. Episode 5. Remember It. Episode 5 opens with Janosha getting ready to join the United Nations, which should be the biggest political win mutants ever had. A real nation, real recognition, and a place where mutants can finally stop begging the world to tolerate them. So, naturally, the episode spends its first half making that dream look beautiful before throwing it into a wood chipper. The X-Men arrive for the celebration, with Magneto being treated like mutant royalty. Stupid sexy Magneto. Madeline Pryor already working with Janosha's council, and Nightcrawler showing up just in time to make everything feel warmer before it goes horribly wrong. The big emotional mess here is Rogue, Gambit, and Magneto. Gambit can tell something is going on, and Nightcrawler gently points out that Rogue and Gambit's souls touch every time they look at each other, which would be romantic if Rogue can actually touch him without draining his life force. Unfortunately, Magneto can block her powers with a magnetic field, meaning their love triangle has now become a physics problem. Meanwhile, Scott and Jean are barely functioning after losing Nathan to the future. During an interview, Scott finally cracks and goes off about humans expecting mutants to smile politely through centuries of hatred. Jean, she ain't doing much better either. And later, when she reaches for Logan in a vulnerable moment, Wolverine acts like an adult and turns her down. Very inconvenient timing for him to develop emotional responsibility. Janosha's council then asks Magneto to lead them, and Magneto asks Rogue to stand behind him. Gambit, he hears enough to know exactly what that means, Cher, and Rogue eventually admits that she and Magneto had a real past back when she was younger, and still trying to figure out where she belonged. Gambit loves her, but he also knows he can't give her the one thing Magneto can, which is a pretty brutal thing to learn at a formal event. Then the gala begins. Rogue and Magneto dance above the crowd, and for a moment, Janosha actually looks like the future Xavier always dreamed about, with mutant art, culture, joy, all of it finally out in the open. And then, everything goes to hell. Madeline senses something's wrong. Cable appears from the future to warn her, and before anyone can stop it, a massive Sentinel attacks the island, and it's a massacre. Mutants are vaporized, and the episode turns into a disaster. Magneto makes one last stand to protect the Morlocks, but even he can't stop what's coming. Then Gambit takes the fight straight to the machine and charges the Sentinel from the inside, saying the name's Gambit, and gives the episode its title, Remember It, in the most painful way possible. With Janosha reduced to ash, Magneto gone, and Rogue left holding the body of the man who loved her enough to die for everyone, the story story pulls back to the two people still missing from the wreckage: Xavier in the stars and Storm in the dark. Episode 6, Life Death Part 2. Episode 6 somehow follows the destruction of Janosha by opening in space because the X-Men universe refuses to process trauma in a straight line. While Earth is still recovering from a mutant genocide, the Shi'ar are fighting the Kree, and Empress Lilandra announces that she intends to marry her royal consort, a very much alive Charles Xavier. Ooh! And yes, Professor X is alive, healed, and apparently one ceremony away from becoming space royalty. Charles tries to settle into this new life, but Lilandra knows his students are still pulling at him, which is fair because his students are the X-Men, and their family issues usually come with clones, funerals, and large-scale property damage. The problem, though, is Lilandra's sister, Deathbird. Who names their child Deathbird? In any culture. But she objects to the marriage and invokes an ancient challenge. If Charles wants to stand beside Lilandra, he has to renounce Earth and erase every memory of his life there. Meanwhile, Storm is still trapped with Forge and the Adversary, the demon feeding on anger and self-loathing. Forge is poisoned, Storm has no powers, and the only thing that can save him is a cactus growing deep in the darkness, which means Storm has to crawl into a mine shaft because losing her powers wasn't enough, without adding claustrophobia to the mix. The Adversary goes to work on her immediately and attacks every insecurity she's been carrying since losing her powers. It tells her she's broken, that Forge betrayed her, and that maybe some part of her wanted to stop being Storm, which is a lot coming from a giant nightmare owl. But Storm finally realizes the neutralizer wasn't the only thing holding her down. The real trap was believing that without her powers, she had become less than herself. So she rejects the fear, rejects the shame, and takes back the part of her that never really left. And so Storm returns in full lightning goddess mode, because subtlety has never once survived contact with Aurora Monroe. Back in space, Charles nearly goes through with the right, but the psychic shock of Janosha hits him before his memories can be erased. He feels Gambit die, sees what happened to his students, and realizes Earth isn't something he can simply leave behind. So Charles chooses to go home, and Storm gets her powers back right when the X-Men need her most. Which would almost feel hopeful if the episode didn't immediately cut to Bolivar Trask begging to be killed for what happened in Janosha. Then Mr. Sinister appears and tells him not to take all the blame, because Janosha was merely the beginning. With Storm restored and Xavier finally aware of what happened on Janosha, the scattered pieces of the team start moving back towards the same wound, but Rogue is already there looking for someone to blame. Episode 7, Bright Eyes. Episode 7 opens with Gambit's funeral because the show decided the audience hadn't been emotionally mugged enough yet. Nightcrawler speaks about Remy LeBeau like a man who understood potential better than anyone, while Jubilee wonders how Rogue could miss the funeral of the man who saved them. Logan's answer is simple: grief is a lonely war, and Rogue is fighting hers somewhere else. And by somewhere else, we mean smashing her way into a secret government facility. Rogue, she's hunting Henry Gyrich because if anyone knows where Bolivar Trask disappeared to after Janosha, it's probably the mutant-hating ghoul who helped fund the Sentinel program in the first place. Her search then brings her face to face with, wait for it, Captain America! This is Marvel, we need cameos, who's also looking for Gyrich, and for about 5 seconds it looks like they might work together. Then Cap explains he can't help her directly because the political optics would be too messy. This ain't my Cap. Rogue handles this with the calm restraint of someone who recently watched two people she loved die, so she steals his shield and throws it into the distance. Honestly, fair. Again, not my Captain America. Back at the mansion though, Beast argues with Trish Tilby about mutant riots and the ugly truth behind tolerance. He makes it clear that people only seem comfortable with mutants when mutants stay quiet, grateful, and unthreatening. So even Beast has officially hit his limit. Rogue eventually finds Gyrich and rips the information she needs straight out of his mind, and she learns about OZT, a shadowy operation connected to Trask, and the X-Men trace him to Madripoor. Meanwhile, Roberto, remember him, he finally tells his mother that he is a mutant. At first, it actually seems like she accepts him because she already knew, and says it was his secret to tell. Then, she immediately pivots into corporate damage control, making it clear the family is going to bury the truth to protect their name. So Roberto gets acceptance and rejection in the same conversation. It's efficient parenting, terrible parenting actually, but efficient. Then in Madripoor, Trask claims Mr. Sinister used his DNA to access Master Mold, and insists he never knew Janosha would become a massacre. Rogue isn't exactly in a forgiving mood though. She saves him from jumping, then drops him herself, and the worst part is that barely anyone can bring themselves to judge her for it. Then Trask gets back up because death apparently is just a loading screen now. His body mutates into a prime Sentinel, and he starts tearing through the X-Men one by one. Rogue and Morph go down, and suddenly the man who helped build a mutant hunting machine becomes one himself. But then Cable arrives just in time, then reveals reveals the bigger problem. Sinister is working for someone worse, and that someone is already planning the next stage of the war. That someone is Bastion, who has Magneto alive and restrained as his prisoner. So the episode ends with Rogue crossing a line, Cable joining the fight, and one of the most powerful mutants on Earth reduced to a hostage. Rogue, she gets her answer, but Trask is only one piece of the machine. Sinister is taking orders from someone worse, and Cable's return makes it clear that the real enemy has been building this war behind the scenes. Episode 8, Tolerance is Extinction, Part 1. Episode 8 finally lets Bastion step out of the shadows, and the man, he wastes no time making himself everybody's problem. Cable explains that in his future, Bastion uses the fallout from Janosha to fund the Prime Sentinel program, creating living weapons with the same techno-organic virus Sinister infected him with as a baby. Bastion also leaks footage proving Charles Xavier is alive in space, which immediately turns public opinion against the X-Men. People think they faked Xavier's death to manipulate sympathy for mutants, and an angry crowd surrounds the mansion. Hopefully it doesn't blow up while they're surrounding it. Meanwhile, Cable tells the team that Bastion has a facility in the present, and Cyclops, Jean, and Cabo follow the lead to a town called Harmony, and it turns out to be Bastion's childhood home, where they meet his mother, and they start piecing together his deeply normal, not at all horrifying origin story. You see, basically, Bastion is the result of Nimrod's time-traveling Sentinel essence, mixing with human biology, which is exactly the kind of sentence only X-Men can make you accept with a straight face. His plan, though, it's even worse. He has successfully turned regular humans into Prime Sentinel sleeper agents, and they don't even know it until he activates them. Then the switch gets flipped. Bastion's own mother transforms into a Prime Sentinel, and soon people everywhere start turning into techno-organic murder machines. Jubilee and Roberto get attacked at his house, Beast realizes Trish Tilby has been infected too, and the X-Men suddenly start fighting neighbors, friends, and people who had no idea their bodies had been turned into weapons. The action goes completely insane from there. Cyclops, Jean, and Cable escape in a car from an exploding X-jet. Wolverine finally gets to cut loose from midair, and Nightcrawler shows up with 3 swords like he has been waiting all season for the animation budget to love him back. While the X-Men fight for their lives, Bastion keeps Magneto prisoner and tries to break him with the future he thinks is inevitable: humanity surviving by enslaving mutant kind. But Dr. Cooper finally sees the truth. He frees Magneto and says the one sentence that basically detonates the episode: Magneto was right. And Magneto responds by proving exactly why that's both satisfying and terrifying. He flies to the top of the world, unleashes a global electromagnetic pulse, and shuts down the entire planet. The Prime Sentinels drop as the world goes dark, but now mutant kind's savior has also maybe doomed everyone else. Then, right when things look completely hopeless, Charles Xavier crashes into the ruined mansion from outer space, removing his weird Shi'ar helmet, and finally says the thing: "To me, my X-Men." Bastion turns the whole world into a battlefield, but Magneto answers by shutting that world down completely, and the X-Men are left with 2 disasters to solve at once. Maybe because one apocalypse felt too manageable for the writers. Episode 9, Tolerance is Extinction, Part 2. Episode 9 begins with the world suffering through Magneto's blackout, and it turns out shutting down the entire planet, it's kinda got consequences. Nuclear plants are heading towards meltdown, civilization is collapsing, and Magneto has rebuilt Asteroid M over the ruins of Xavier's school, like the drama queen final boss he was always born to be. The X-Men are stuck between 2 catastrophes. If they reverse Magneto's EMP too soon, Bastion's Prime Sentinels come back online. If they wait too long, the planet dies anyway. So Xavier splits the team. Cyclops leads Blue Team to Asteroid M to stop Magneto, while Storm and Jean lead Gold Team to the Galapagos to shut down Bastion. Basically 2 world-ending problems, 1 team, and absolutely no margin for error. Before the mission, Cyclops finally confronts Xavier about handing the school to Magneto. Xavier explains he only wanted Scott and Jean to have a chance at a normal life, which is touching, flawed, and exactly the kind of maddening decision Charles Xavier would make while calling it wisdom. Then the Autobots roll out, and the episode turns into pure chaos. Blue Team gets to Asteroid M, where Rogue and Roberto have joined Magneto because humanity has spent the whole season making his argument look annoyingly persuasive. Rogue is grieving, Roberto is furious, and both of them are tired of asking nicely to be treated like people. Gold Team hits Bastion's base, but the fight is no cleaner. Bastion is still controlling the Prime Sentinels through his technopathy, and Sinister manages to hijack Cable's mind, forcing Jean to fight her own son from the future. Family therapy isn't going to fix this one, y'all. Also, yes, Cable is their son from the future, by the way. Meanwhile, on Asteroid M, Xavier needs Magneto's helmet removed so he can enter his mind and reverse the damage to Earth. For a moment, it looks looks like he has the opening, but Cyclops stops him because Gold Team still needs more time. It was the right call, but it also meant Charles had to wait while the planet kept falling apart. We live on that planet. The fight keeps escalating. X-Man fights X-Men. Old loyalties tear open, and Magneto once again argues that Xavier's dream only asks mutants to die politely. Wolverine, who has spent most of the season weirdly quiet by Wolverine standards, maybe because he was like the main character of the original show, he finally decides he's done debating. Magneto, he lets his guard down for 1 single second, and Logan takes it. He drives his claws straight through Magneto, finally doing the thing he's been threatening to do for years. And for a split second, it looks like the fight is over. Then Magneto reminds everyone that Wolverine's skeleton is basically a giant metal invitation, and he rips the adamantium from Logan's bones, recreating one of the most infamous moments in X-Men history and leaving the team frozen in horror. Earth is still on the edge at this point, especially with Bastion still loose, because Magneto's barely alive and Wolverine has been torn apart in a way even he may not be able to walk away from. Episode 10, Tolerance is Extinction, Part 3. Alright kids, so Wolverine has had the adamantium ripped from his bones, Magneto is wounded but still dangerous, and Xavier is forced to dive into his mind to repair the damage before both of them are lost. So yes, the finale begins with psychic brain surgery on the man currently holding the planet hostage. The good news is that Charles can stop the blackout if he can reach the part of Magneto that still remembers who he used to be. The bad news is that reversing the EMP brings Bastion's prime Sentinels back online, which means the X-Men are basically choosing which apocalypse gets to happen first. At Bastion's base, Jean, Storm, Cable, and the others are getting overwhelmed. Bastion and Sinister have Cable under control, and things look completely finished until Jean taps into the last spark of the Phoenix Force. She breaks through, protects her son, burns Sinister down to the pathetic old man underneath all that stolen mutant DNA, and finally gets the scrambler onto Bastion. That shuts down the Prime Sentinel threat, but Bastion wasn't done yet because the guy eventually escapes and heads for Asteroid M, because if he can't build his future through evolution, he was just going to crash that asteroid into Earth anyway. It's always so nice when the villain keeps a backup genocide ready, like, what? The X-Men try to stop him, but Bastion upgrades into the final boss and starts tearing through them. Even after everything he's done, Cyclops tries to reach him, telling him he's not alone and that he doesn't have to be defined by the future programmed into him. Bastion responds about as well as you would expect from a man whose entire personality is weaponized resentment. Then the Magneto protocols launch missiles at Asteroid M, and now the X-Men have to stop Bastion. The asteroid survive the missiles and somehow keep the planet from becoming a dinosaur exhibit. The team decides to move the asteroid themselves. Scott is ready to stay behind and die if that's what it takes, but everyone realizes Gambit didn't sacrifice himself so the rest of them could just give up. So they work together with Forge, guiding them from below to push Asteroid M away from Earth. Scott and Jean also finally get a real goodbye with Cable, and Scott tells his son the thing he never got to say when Nathan was sent into the future. He loves him. After everything this family has been through, that tiny moment, it somehow hits harder than half the explosions. Inside Magneto's mind, Xavier reaches Eric by taking him back to the pain that shaped him. He reminds him that family isn't only resemblance or blood, it's the people who keep fighting for you, even when you make that extremely difficult. Magneto remembers himself. He restores the planet's power, and the world is saved. Except the X-Men vanish with Asteroid M. 6 months later, the world thinks they are dead. Bishop recruits Forge to find them because this isn't their first rodeo. And meanwhile, the missing team has been scattered through time, with some landing in the distant future and others in ancient Egypt, right in front of En Saba Nor. Now guys, X-Men 97, it's an awesome show that even got nominated for an Emmy because it brings back the old show without using nostalgia as fuel. And I mean, they kinda did, but not entirely. The real story that hits you right in the feels, it's Xavier's dream being tested harder than ever. By the end of the season 1, the X-Men are scattered through time while Apocalypse is waiting, and things are only about to get more interesting come season 2. And guys, if you made it this far and enjoyed yourselves, let me know down below which episode was your favorite and whether Xavier's dream you think it can survive after Janosha. And with that said, thank you all so much for watching, commenting, and have a good one. Bye-bye!